Welcome to my channel, Veterans Legacy. Today's story isn't just about machines, or war, or even the men who fly into danger. It's about faith, experience, and the kind of legacy that lives beyond the battlefield. So sit back, because what you're about to hear will take you deep into a hangar where silence had become heavier than the sound of gunfire, until one man, an old veteran long retired, walked in and changed everything. It was a cold, gray morning at Fort Rucker. The rain had been falling for hours, drumming on the sheet metal roofs of the maintenance hangars where the Army's most elite helicopter, the AH-64 Apache, sat grounded. Inside Hangar 12, a group of engineers, specialists, and mechanics huddled around the broken beast. Its twin engines, the heart of its power, had failed during a training flight the day before. The pilot had brought her down safely, but barely. Now, the machine was dead. For days, the team had been trying to bring her back. The digital diagnostics offered no clear reason for the failure. Every test, every scan came back clean. Yet, every time they powered it up, the same haunting cough, the same sputter, the same silence. Captain Lewis, a young commander with fire in his eyes and exhaustion in his voice, stood in the middle of it all. His men respected him, but they could see the weight he carried. This wasn't just about a machine. This was about reputation, pride, and trust. The Apache belonged to his battalion, his responsibility. And for 3 days, she hadn't flown. The hangar lights flickered. Rain streaked down the large glass windows. The smell of hydraulic oil and burnt wiring filled the air. "Sir," one of the engineers said, removing his headset. "We've run every diagnostic the manual allows. It's not electrical, not mechanical. Whatever this is, it's not in the books." Lewis stared at the massive engine shell, his jaw tight. "Everything has a reason," he muttered. "Machines don't just quit." But deep down, even he knew, this wasn't ordinary. By the 4th day, command had started asking questions. A team from the manufacturer had been called, but even they had no clue. They replaced parts, recalibrated sensors, and reprogrammed the onboard systems, but the Apache remained silent. One of the senior warrant officers finally said quietly, "Sir, maybe we should call in someone else." Lewis turned. "Who?" The man hesitated. "There's someone. Retired. Used to work on Apaches back in the 90s. The kind of guy who could listen to an engine and tell you its story. Folks used to call him Chief Ironhand." Lewis raised an eyebrow. "Ironhand?" The warrant officer smiled faintly. "Yeah, Chief Warrant Officer Raymond Dale. 30 years in service. Fixed Apaches in Iraq, Afghanistan, you name it. He retired about 10 years ago. Lives a few miles outside Dothan now." Lewis didn't even think twice. Call him. It was late afternoon when the hangar doors opened, and an old pickup truck rolled in. Out stepped a man with silver hair, a weathered face, and eyes that carried both storms and sunsets. His uniform was long gone. He wore a simple jacket, the kind veterans wear without needing to say who they were. He looked around slowly, like someone greeting an old friend after too long. "So," he said finally, his voice gravelly but calm, "where's the patient?" Captain Lewis stepped forward. "Chief Dale, sir. Thank you for coming." Dale just gave a nod. "Haven't been called, Chief, in years, son. Let's see what kind of trouble your bird's in." The men stepped aside as he approached the Apache. For a long moment, he didn't touch anything. He just looked, walked around her, hands in his pockets. "She's seen some action," he murmured. "You can tell by the wear on her belly armor." "Desert sand did that," one of the younger mechanics whispered. "How can he tell that?" The older warrant smirked. "He just can." Finally, Dale stopped in front of the engine. He rested one hand on the metal casing, almost like he was feeling for a pulse. "You've changed the filters, lines, ignition." "Yes, sir," said Lewis. 3 times. He nodded. "And the fuel regulator, replaced yesterday." Dale knelt beside the open cowling, flashlight in hand. He examined each connection with a surgeon's patience. Then, after a few minutes, he sighed and stood up. "You've been looking at this like a machine," he said softly. "But she's more than that. These birds, they've got spirit. They don't fail for no reason." The younger mechanics exchanged glances. Lewis frowned. "With respect, sir, spirit doesn't stop an engine." Dale gave a small, knowing smile. Doesn't it ever see what happens when a bird feels neglected? He walked to the cockpit and climbed in. The seat creaked under his weight. He ran his fingers along the controls, the switches, the throttle. He seemed to remember where everything was, like it had been yesterday. "She's talking to me," he whispered. "You just have to listen right." Then he closed his eyes. For nearly a minute, the hangar was completely silent except for the rain. Then he opened them and said, "Start her up." The engineers hesitated. "Sir, it won't do it," Dale said firmly. The turbines began to spin. The sound rose, coughing, struggling, choking, then died again. Dale just nodded. "Okay, I know where she's hurting." He climbed down and pointed to a specific area near the fuel control module. "Pull that hose." "Sir, that's new." "Pull it." They did. Inside, the line looked clean. But when Dale tilted it slightly, a thin glimmer of moisture slid out, not fuel, but water. "Condensation," he said, "trapped inside the line. The regulator thinks it's getting pressure, but it's starving the combustion. You could run 1,000 diagnostics and never find it." Everyone stared. "How did you?" "Because I've seen it before," Dale said quietly. "I saw it happen once in Kandahar, 2004. Same sound. Same engine cough. We lost a crew that day because we didn't listen soon enough." The hangar fell silent again. No one asked more questions. They followed his lead, replacing the line, flushing the system, recalibrating manually, not by the book, but by instinct. When it was done, Dale stepped back. "Now try her." Lewis nodded to his crew. The turbines whined again, spinning faster, smoother. The deep growl filled the air. Then, the moment everyone had been waiting for, the engine roared to life. The Apache's blades began to turn, slow at first, then faster, slicing the air like thunder. The hangar shook with life. The young engineers cheered. Some of them laughed, others clapped, and a few just stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief. Captain Lewis turned to the old man, speechless. Dale simply looked at the machine and smiled. She just needed someone to remember her language. After the engine test, Lewis found Dale standing outside the hangar, looking up at the sky. The rain had stopped, and a faint glow of sunset broke through the clouds. "You saved us today," Lewis said softly. Dale shook his head. "No, I just reminded her who she was. And maybe reminded a few of you, too." Lewis nodded slowly. "How do you do it, sir? After all these years, how do you still know every sound, every bolt, every piece?" Dale's eyes were distant. "Because these machines carried us when nothing else could. Every screw, every rotor blade, it's built from the blood and sweat of soldiers who trusted it to bring them home. You never forget something that saves your life." He paused. "You ever fly one?" Lewis shook his head. "No, sir, I command the ground crew." Dale smiled faintly. "Then remember this. The pilot may fly her, but the crew gives her wings." That night, the base was quieter. The Apache sat ready again, gleaming under the hangar lights. Dale was about to leave when Lewis walked up, holding something wrapped in cloth. "Chief," he said, handing it to him, "this was from one of our pilots. He said if we ever met someone who could bring his bird back from the dead, we should give this to him." Dale unfolded the cloth. Inside was an old patch. Faded, frayed, but unmistakable. 1st Battalion, 227th Aviation Regiment. He traced the edges of it with his thumb. "I wore this once," he whispered. Lewis blinked. "You did?" "Yeah," Dale said, "long before you were born." For a long moment, they just stood there, two soldiers from different eras, connected by the same sound of rotor blades and the same heartbeat of a machine that refused to die. As Dale drove away, the headlights of his truck faded into the night. Back at the hangar, Lewis looked up at the Apache, alive again, proud again, and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't know if he was talking to the old man or the helicopter. Maybe both. The next morning, the Apache took off for her first flight since the breakdown. The sunrise hit her blades, painting gold streaks across the sky. The roar echoed over the field, a sound not just of power, but of legacy. Down below, Lewis watched. He remembered what Dale had said. She just needed someone to remember her language. And maybe, he thought, that was true of all of them, machines, soldiers, even nations. Sometimes you just need someone who remembers. Years later, stories of that day spread quietly through the base, told in passing between new recruits and old mechanics. Most thought it was just a myth, an old veteran walking in, fixing what no one else could. But those who were there remembered. They remembered the smell of oil, the rain on the roof, the silence breaking into thunder. And they remembered Chief Raymond Dale, the man who listened when others gave up. He never came back to the base again. But sometimes, during late-night maintenance shifts, the younger techs would swear they heard a voice, calm and steady, saying, "Listen to her. She'll tell you what she needs." And the Apache would hum, alive, almost like she remembered him too. So, to every veteran, every mechanic, every soldier who's ever kept a machine alive so others could come home, this story is for you. Not every hero wears medals or rides into battle. Some simply keep the engines of courage running, quietly, faithfully, in the shadows of history. And for that, we remember them. Thank you for watching, my friends. This has been Veterans Legacy, where we honor the men, women, and machines that built the backbone of freedom. If this story moved you, if it made you remember someone you once knew, or made you proud of the legacy you stand in, then please, like, comment, and subscribe.